Okay, hold on. I don't see Ann making any videos here. Why does it say Ann there? This channel is more like Andy does stuff. Yeah, there we go. Okay, on with the video. So I wasn't planning on building a garden bed this year. And these tomato plants, yeah, we probably won't get any tomatoes from them. Honestly, I was a little slow to build this thing, but hey, it was fun. So, how did it happen? Well, Anne planted some seeds early this spring, and that meant the race was on to give them a nice home to grow up in. Started where I always do, in SketchUp. I'll share a link to this model in the description in case anyone wants to build something similar. The goals of this bed were something space efficient that would still give us enough room to grow a decent amount of veggies, and hopefully something deer and rabbit proof. There are lots and lots of rabbits around here. And deer. Honestly, I'm not sure how deer proof it is. Those things can jump pretty high, but we'll see. This thing ended up being about 12 feet wide, 7 feet deep, and 5.5 feet tall. After the model was done, I made a Google sheet with all of the materials needed. Having a model meant I could measure and calculate exact amounts for all of my materials. This actually worked out great, and I had very minimal scrap left over. It also helped me remember what each length of board was intended for while I was building. I'd guess the total cost came to around $1,000, not the $787.32 on my sheet here, but more on that later. The first step was to cut the lock off the garage again, because I lost the key again. And now that I could access my garage again, I could unload definitely the biggest load of materials that I've picked up so far. After that, I screwed together some batter boards and did some rough layout. This spot in the front yard gets the most consistent sun, and it'll get rid of some lawn, which is an added bonus in my opinion. I definitely should have gotten sturdier stakes for this. Luckily, accuracy was not really critical here. Lesson learned though. With the rough layout done, I attached everything securely with some nails and nuts. If I did this again, I definitely would have paused here and roughly leveled out this area. This caused some extra work down the line, but nothing too bad. These posts are here just to mark the rough location of the holes. And speaking of holes, this part actually went easier than I expected. Placing and plumbing up posts is definitely a two-person job, or maybe a job for one person with more than two arms. After everything was staked in place, it was time for some concrete. The next weekend, after the concrete had time to cure, I started on leveling out the inside. I clamped a board to one side to give myself a rough reference level, then worked my way around each side. The problem here is that I was limited by the concrete base of the highest post, leaving me with some gaps on the low sides. I had to come back later and cut some angled pieces to fill those spots in. Not a big deal, but I could have saved some time and money by thinking ahead. Finally, I could start cutting and attaching some boards. I was much more careful this time to establish a solid level on each piece. Look at all that pressure-treated lumber. Getting there, right? Sadly, no. This is about when I learned that you should not use pressure-treated lumber for garden beds. You know, what with all the chemicals and such leaching into the soil where you're planning on growing food. So, time to rip this out and replace it with some cedar. Okay, back to it. The next weekend, I picked up some cedar 2x6s. Not the cheapest wood ever, but at least it looks nice. Once the outside was done, I could move on to building the inner bed walls. This is where the SketchUp model really came in handy. Being able to confirm which boards overlapped in which directions was super helpful. Okay, on to building the door. I screwed together a rough frame just using butt joints. Then I squared up everything and clamped it down to the workbench. Then I laid out a cross brace going from the hinge side at the top to the opposite corner at the bottom. This should hopefully keep the door from sagging over time and turning into more of a parallelogram. I'm not sure what technique you'd call this in woodworking, maybe mortising? In any case, it was definitely my favorite part since I got to bust out some proper woodworking tools here. It was pretty simple really, just mark the angle of the brace, mark the depth, connect the lines, make some angled cuts, cope out the majority of the waste, route to the finished depth, then do a bit of chiseling to get a good fit. Mounting the hinges in the door was actually easier than I expected with the help of a few clamps. The latch was also super simple to mount. Then I could finish off the front with the remaining cedar boards for a wraparound look. Definitely the most awkward part was getting the wire fencing started and stretched nicely. I used poultry staples to attach it to the frame, then cut along the edges of the door to free it up. The last construction step was to mark and cut off the extra post material. These got finished off with some post caps later on. Finally, it was time for a load of gravel to finish off the inside, and some soil for the beds themselves. I did consider putting down some landscaping paper at first, but after looking into it a bit, it seemed like it's honestly pretty pointless. Weeds will find a way to grow, and if I can avoid putting more plastic into the ground, I'm all for it. As I mentioned at the beginning, these plants got a pretty late start to the season, but we decided to give them a shot anyway. Next spring we'll be prepared. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like. If not, I'm not sure how you made it this far. In any case, that's it for this one. See you next time.